The version that's on the lectionary says, "My joy is gone and my grief is upon me and my heart is sick." I read that and I thought of a lot of people. I thought of myself in some ways, and I thought of a lot of different people. And I always love going to the lectionary when I volunteer to preach or Jason asked me to preach, and I'm just like, okay, what's the most depressing passage I can bring to everybody? And then allow the divine to do what the divine does and turn our pain to joy. Do you remember being a kid and playing or pretending like you're God? Maybe it was changing, somebody's like, yeah. Maybe it was changing the direction of water flow after a rainstorm, or if like you're in a river and damming something up and you're like, ha ha, take that. Or maybe it's creating and growing something from a ground. I think Jason was talking about his grandmother a while back when she passed away, and he was talking about how he would always go and the divine was in her, like it was always a welcoming place. And Jason has a love for gardening, and that's that creation piece that God puts in us. And so maybe it's growing something from the ground, or maybe it was the old-fashioned killing of ants, where you could like zap them with a magnifying glass, or you just like smush them with your thumb, and you're like, pscow. My son will play video games. They're into like Super Smash Brothers, or right now they're playing like Mario Odyssey or something like that. And while playing the video game, he'll be killing enemies, and he'll be like, ha ha, smited you. I'm like, where did you learn the word smite you? Like, where does that come into the vocabulary? And so we're walking out of Orange High School. Me and my wife both worked there. And we went to the football game the other night, and a student stopped me as I was walking out, talking about their relationship woes, as I often hear about. And the story goes that the mom of whatever boy she was talking to doesn't like Christian people at all. And it's some certain like philosophy that she goes by or something like that. And the story is probably wild, but we walked away, and Micah, who came in to steal my van, said, God is going to smite that person for not being a Christian. And again, I was like, skirt! What did you just say? And we've had a lot of those like skirt, like break hitting kind of moments with my boys. Things that they're learning to say, things that they're learning from other kids and stuff like that, things they could be learning from their father, who knows. But we've had those moments recently where my boys are learning. And recently it's been they're learning what it means to be gay, and asking things of like, can two people of the same gender be together and be married and things like that. Just these unprovoked conversations and very like deep questions. And I never really intentionally bring them up. I want that to be organic. My parents were the same way. My parents were Christian people, but they never really talked about it other than Jesus being over the corded telephone against the wall, Jesus being over our dinner table with the Last Supper, thing that I guess every family in the 80s and 90s had. And we prayed over every meal, and right beside the door was the Footprints old school poem that, Jesus walking with me and was actually carrying me and things like that. That was as you walked out the door, but as you walked in the door, it was the old school, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord kind of thing. But my parents, I can maybe think of 3 times over 15 years before it was my decision to go to church by myself, that we went to church, and it was just me and my mom, because my dad worked all the time. And so I wanted to take that same philosophy and never really intentionally put it on my kids. I wanted my kids to organically have these questions about life, and then here or in the car or just walking through nature or things like that, we had these conversations. But the smite thing threw me for a loop. Where did he learn the word, the term, the philosophy, the thought that God smited, because I could tell you that when I do kids and I do Bible stories with them upstairs from the iPad, from the YouVersion Kids app, they never talk about things being smited. I can guarantee you that, because that's not us. And it's one thing for him to hear the conservative approach that I grew up with, of God being upset with the state of affairs of Israel and things like that, and but they can probably hear that from friends that go to other conservative churches, or maybe those friends hold some of the same opinions that their parents have. But smite is on a whole different level of things. Come to find out, they heard it from a cartoon called the Animaniacs. And some of you, you just giggled because we grew up with that most likely. As kids, we watched it as kids, and they came out with a whole new season of it recently. And so when I heard that, I took a sigh of relief, because they haven't watched that in a long time. But it kept me mindful that what they watch sticks with them. And so, but you can imagine all the emotions that someone has to feel to believe that God is capable of smiting, or that someone should be smited, or that someone wants to be smited. Because we have all of those emotions and pain. We have those things in our lives, those thoughts, those feelings, whether it's personal, whether it's something that has been done to us. Maybe it's the first time we had COVID. My wife just got over it, and I'm still a COVID virgin, and I plan to stay that way. But my wife, for the Wednesday and Thursday that she was sick, she felt like death, and she was just like, God, take me now. It was rough. Or maybe it's the fifth time somebody's had COVID. Maybe you have somebody in your circle that's sick. Maybe someone recently died. Maybe you're like me and you're wondering what kind of world our children or the generations that are coming after us are going to inherit, with the complication of body wars, of race, of social injustice, of climate change, battle for democracy. And people, you hear it all the time, people will say God is man, is returning, is going to take care of what needs to be taken care of when he returns. Or some people would say, can God just already come and get this over with? I'm tired of living, right, in the middle of being sick. God, take me now. Imagine Jeremiah's situation. Because it sounds like that he's at the end of his rope, emotionally, mentally, probably physically as well. He's tired of seeing his family and his friends suffer. He's tired of seeing the wickedness, the evil of just people in general. And he's tired of seeing social injustices happening all around him and ignoring the actual decrees of what God actually wanted them to do while we were here on this earth, to raise up the poor, to house the orphan, to care for the widowed, to be a decent freaking human being. That was the calling even then, and remains the calling now. He's tired of his own mental anguish from what was ahead for his land if they didn't turn away from their insanity and turn toward what they were being called to be all along. A lot of the book of Jeremiah is like this, where he is lamenting, where he's crying out to the people, where he's crying out to God, where he's pleading with the people, but he's also reminding people of something all the while. And so my sons, Mike and Judah, were walking with me after the smiting line that came from the Animaniacs. And Micah said that God is going to smite everyone who wasn't a Christian. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank God there's nobody around. And that's when the brakes in my mind really slammed shut. And stopped everything. And I told him to think about everyone that we had just walked by, that were in the stands and the stands on the opposite side of the field, and that were playing on the field, and that were up in the press box with us. And I told him to think about everyone that we had just walked by. And probably not all of them believed in God, and probably not all of them cared about Christianity or anything like that. And yet they were still walking and talking and living and moving and breathing. And then I went into that every day is a chance to figure out what it means to believe in God, what it means to live, move, walk, and breathe with this thought of what's the divine doing next. What it means to walk like Jesus walked here on this earth, which is what Christianity actually means. He didn't know that. He just thought Christian meant believe in God. I was like, no, Christian is actually making the intentional choice to walk like Jesus walked. And I told him, that's why you see our church help people, serve people. That's why we meet every Sunday. That's why we take communion. That's why we make intentional choices with what we say and what we do around people. That's why we love people no matter who they are. That's why I always tell them, my famous line, and they can repeat it verbatim. I should have had them do it. That's why I always tell them that their words are powerful, that they have the power to help people or to hurt people. And to always choose your words to help, to lift somebody up. I got to speak about our family values and our church values, even just for a brief moment. And they nodded, both of them were listening for once, and they nodded in the affirmative, and then someone needed to pee. And then it went on from there. And so while Jeremiah's words were full of lament and despair throughout the it's if you want to be in your feelings, read Jeremiah. If you're in your feels, read Jeremiah and be like, oh, I can relate to somebody. Much of his writings are like that, but he's mindful not to leave us there. And it's, God is the divine working within him to not leave him there. The age-old verse. Everybody loves it. Jeremiah 29:11. You see it on T-shirts, bumper stickers, planes. I don't know. And you definitely hear it at Fellowship of Christian Athletes all the time. It's their go-to. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for you to prosper and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah on behalf of God, speaking directly to his people, to his family and his friends, and anybody who's within earshot and whoever would read it. And the direct translation is actually, instead of just plans, it's an active version of thoughts and plans. It's what I'm thinking about you. It's what I'm planning for you, and all those kind of things. And so that even through our despair, that even in the midst of all that, right here, right now, that even in our despair and our worst thoughts and our lowest moments, that God, the divine, is actively moving and working, even when we don't want God to, even when we don't think that God is, even when we could care less that God is, that God, the divine, is still actively moving and working, thinking and planning, even when we want to be smited, even when we want someone else to be smited. The divine is actively working for me, for you, for them, for the other, for those people, whomever those people are for you. And so in these moments that we are in, where COVID is still creeping around every freaking corner, where everything in your life might feel like it's falling apart, where power is being battled for everywhere you listen to and hear from, where people are barely just getting by, whether that's emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, whatever it might be, where the world might burn before our children get to fully experience it. I'll remind you of what Jeremiah's people had to remember through Jeremiah's words of lament, but then encouragement. Remember that God is. God just is. The divine is. Never ceases. God, the divine, is. That the divine is the ultimate good. It's the ultimate healing. It's the ultimate love. that God is good and God is creating, meaning not done yet. That God is good and creating more goodness for us to experience constantly and over and over and over again. And that God is good, creating more goodness, and is inviting us to do the very same in relationship with the divine and with each other, no matter who the other is. And so may you take these words, may you go in peace from here.